morning, Rainbow Push family and friends. I'm honored to be back with you today. First of all, I'd like to make mention of one other person today, Miss Maria Pappas. Maria Pappas is our county treasurer right here in the city of Chicago, in the county of Cook. She has done something extraordinary. She has assigned one of her staff persons to maintain some hours here so you don't have to go downtown, don't have to do heavy overrate and overpaying on parking. And out of Rainbow Push this year, with the assistance of one of her workers, Ms. Rosa, we have returned over $5 million to the community. For other persons, ministers, churches that want to get involved, please come by. This can be replicated in many other places. I was returned $2,000 that I did not know I was due. Of that, you'll get 10% to Rainbow Push, and more can get that funds as well. Once you've been blessed and get some found money, you better share. On last week, I had the opportunity to go to the border. Now, I must tell you, it is really cool being the son of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Now, I, like many of you, had something else to do, had other things on my mind. I was looking forward to being in here in an air-conditioned room, and I had some other weekend activities, but my father told me and Pastor Will Hall, you need to have eyes on, boots on the ground, firsthand knowledge of what's happening. I thought I had seen it all looking at television, having read the newspaper. Thank God for my father, the Reverend Jackson, where his ministry is not confined to the walls. He has an ability to see the world. And as we left here on Friday, I will tell you, I will not complain. As I got down there and what I saw, and what I mean by being cool to have your father, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Some people want their dad to be a basketball player, a football player. Nice if your dad has a lot of money. But when you can ask your father the eternal questions, the purpose of life, when you can have something meaningful to do with your father, when you can do something that makes a difference in other people's lives, Dad, that's cool. So just briefly, Reverend Will Hall and I, we left from Chicago, went to O'Hare, and weather was bad. As you see, this storm clouds are changing and weather patterns are changing around the world. We got our flight delayed, altered, changed, and finally couldn't make it through Dallas, went through Houston, flew into Houston, couldn't make our connection, had to spend the night. Praise God, there was a drunk driver when we got there at 12:30 at night, ran through a light and hit a wall just in front of us. These streets are dangerous. And was so drunk, put it in reverse, came out and kept on going. So we don't know the date or time that it could be our last date and time. Thank God for that. Having driven that night and got about 3 hours sleep and went back to the airport to make our connection into El Paso the next morning, and to have been greeted in El Paso before we went down to the border, I didn't know what to expect. I saw many of the pictures on there. First of all, I want to say thank you to the congressperson and the NGOs that are down there working tirelessly. We went to Casa Imigracion in Juarez, where the brothers of the Catholic Church or the Franciscan Order were out there working and doing services. I know we've heard a lot of things about the Catholic Church, but every day somewhere they're doing some good, and we praise God for their service in these neighborhoods, in and out, all year long. But let me tell you what struck me about Juarez and El Paso. El Paso is a modern city, 650,000 people, right on the border. Nothing separates the border of Mexico and the United States but a bit of a canal. 1.35 million people live in Juarez, Mexico, a modern city. I could see gleaming in the skyline beautiful American factories. You couldn't tell America from Mexico because it's all the same goods, all the same services, all the same companies. Juarez, Mexico is on the other side of the border where life expectancy drops quickly. When I left El Paso at 104 degrees on Saturday and 105 on Sunday in a room not much larger than this, of 3,000 square feet, and they have the pallets and the little mattresses that they lay out during the evening and pick up in the night. One little air conditioning unit that I have in my bedroom in my house has to cool over 100 people. I noticeably saw women and children in there with nothing to do. They didn't have enough balls, only had one television, and just the agony of having to sit. Now, this was the good side because this was in the Catholic Church. The people are able to leave, but they know it's dangerous out there because there are all sort of predators that are trying to pick up women and children that are desperate. So we finally came and had lunch with them and saw people pass out food. And although they were scheduled to have a day off, they were anticipating 300 more people on top of the 300 people that were there, where people are having to wash their clothes. And when a woman leaves her country of El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, and all she has is her underclothes on and her jeans and one pair of shoes, and carried the one child that she could. Being poor and uneducated and not speaking another language, not knowing where she was going, but knowing where she had to flee from. Having sold all of their possessions, they are simply wanting some level of safety and freedom. There's a difference between someone illegally breaking into the country versus what is constitutionally written on an asylum seeker. When you cannot have any safety in your home, you are an asylum seeker. My father talked with you about the 1919 race riots here in the city of Chicago, which was one of 25 cities in Elaine, Arkansas, and Washington, D.C., and Omaha, Nebraska. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited about this time in life because we are now going through a revolution of our culture and understanding our history. This was not a great migration. We too were asylum seekers within our own country. When persons that had committed lynchings had never been prosecuted. Right here in Chicago 100 years ago, on July 27th, 1919, when a young African-American child built a raft, and some racists said there's a white part of the beach and there's a black part of the beach. God made one beach, but somebody said there's a white part of the beach and a black part of the beach. When his little handmade raft went over into the white side of the beach and someone threw a stone and killed the child, someone rose up in righteous indignation and stood up to fight back. And then race riots came out, and then the people that saw the child, that threw the stone that killed the child, went to the police, and the police sat on their hands. They did nothing. So I applaud our mayor, Miss Lori Lightfoot, today, when she tells the FOP representative that you're a clown. I want to see some more men stand up and second the motion. He's a clown. And when they asked our mayor to apologize, she says, "I'm sorry my mic was on." When she was asked to apologize, she says, "I'm sorry my microphone was on." Now, our pastor, the Reverend Clay Evans, if you pushed him in a corner after he shared with you what was really on his mind, he would tell you, "I will add more to that before I take it away." She said what she meant, and she meant what she said. Now, when you've been sworn to uphold the law, and you've lied on your paperwork, you lied on a dead child, and you have no remorse, and you're talking about, "I lost my job, and this man has the temerity, the audacity, the unmitigating gall. He is a shameless soul at the FOP to ask for those men to get back on the force. We have great law enforcement officers. Those scoundrels, those lowlifes need to be prosecuted for lying on the dead. Now, I don't know what you're doing at home and in television land, but honest to God, you need to be at Rainbow Push, where the free people can speak. Doesn't it feel good to get it off your chest? I couldn't help but think about being in Juarez and have to ask myself the purpose of life. And that's where I say it's cool to have a minister as your father. You may not be able to go out and do all the things that people are doing that's cool and fun. But when you get a little bit older, you can appreciate the big picture. When I was driving into Juarez and I was thinking about the Talmud, the Jewish scriptures, and I couldn't help but think about the purpose of life. When you're down there and you have no shoes and your last clothes, I'm trying to put up clothes that I can no longer wear, that I don't want to give away. I, like many of you, got too much stuff. And if this is my last day on earth, what was it all about? Now, the Talmud in the old scripture says there was 613 things you need to do to get right in life. But then as it evolved and you got all the way to Isaiah and Micah, it ended up saying you only need to get 3 things right. You have to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And if you can't remember those 3, just remember the 2. To do justice and love kindness. Now, I know the president is boasting about the Supreme Court letting him build a wall. But God didn't build walls. He made mountaintops. He made valleys. He made rivers. He made estuaries. He made canals. He made a beautiful world. It's not filled with walls. What can be viewed as a victory in man's eyes to have a wall, you better be concerned about what God is looking at when you talk about separating his children. As I couldn't help but think about crossing over that river into Juarez from El Paso. You know that's right there in the corner next to which state? New Mexico. We're talking about Mexicans that can't come even into New Mexico. Who made these rules? You need to think and wake up and stop following behind rules that were meant to exclude you. God made the whole world. So when he sees people in Nicaragua, and he sees people in Guatemala, and he sees people in El Salvador and Honduras, those 18 and 6 and 6 and 9 million people, those are his children also. When I started thinking about the United States of America and the chants that we heard the other week, send them home, send them home. Dad, I could see in my mind's eye the Mayan temples down in Mexico. BCE, before the Christ era. BC, before Christ. AD, after death. When you're talking about Mayan ruins and statues and pyramids that have been up 1,800 years before Christ walked the earth, who are you talking about needs to go home? When you talk about how is this crisis being fueled, well, the Mexicans have a role to play in this. They can even discriminate against their own Spanish-speaking brothers from another part of the hemisphere. I saw water parks, but I saw the children behind the church doors that had nothing to do. The Mexican government can step up and offer asylum and help employment and let those children play in the water park in Juarez. Do you think someone that speaks Spanish would discriminate against someone else that speaks Spanish? Let me say it another way. Do you think one black person with a degree would discriminate against another black person without a degree? There's discrimination there. And one of the heartwarming things before we left, Dad, was one of the officers, one of the non-GOs, said to me and Reverend Hall, thank you for coming. It's good that these people see African Americans, because there are African Americans in Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala and Panama and Chile and Spain. They need to see you care. There's a $320 billion worldwide drug business that's going on. You saw the headlines last week where there was $1.3 billion worth of cocaine picked up off of a ship owned by J.P. Morgan Chase in New Jersey. Now, when that cocaine comes out of Guatemala and Honduras, the people tell me it's $2,200 a kilo for the small farmer. That $2,200 becomes $12,000 when it makes its way to Mexico. From there, and it meets its distribution worldwide into Europe and the United States, it's $52,000 to $55,000 a kilo. When the 300,000 people were killed in Guatemala and people were sent to Los Angeles and deported, when the Ronald Wilson Reagan started passing guns and drugs in exchange to have democracy, quote unquote, what he said, racial hegemony in the Central America, we created the problem. When we heard from Congresswoman Maxine Waters and talking about the CIA, the cocaine import agency, bringing these drugs into our country. We don't make cocaine here. We don't make the marijuana here. Where is it coming from? When 50% of these drugs of heroin and cocaine is coming out of Colombia, they know where it is. They got GPS in cars, planes, even in your phone. We can eradicate drugs. This stuff is coming up on the Panamanian American Highway every day. But like my father says, just because they bring you the drugs, you don't have to use them. You don't have to turn to despair and want to be sleepy all day and escape your pain. Why don't you come out to Rainbow Push? Why don't you go to a church somewhere high and climb to a higher height? Our country is spending $40 billion a year, quote unquote, fighting the war on drugs, incarcerating, locking up 1.5 million people a year, putting in jail 500,000 people a year in the war on drugs, and disproportionately, that's 6 blacks for every 1 white. We know there's a war on the poor and not a war on the drugs. Watch the language in closing, ladies and gentlemen. I was trying to find America's back door. What do you do in a back door versus the front door? The back door versus the front door. The front door is close to the living room, architecturally speaking, and your sitting room, or even your dining room. The front door. The back door, if you have a large house, you may have a mud room to take your shoes off into, hang your coat up. The back door is where the kitchen is, where the help comes in, where you take out the garbage. The back door of America, they say, is Mexico, a country of 129 million people. I guess the front door is Canada, a country of roughly 39 million people. Our largest trading partner is Mexico, not Canada. The south of our hemisphere is 2/3 larger than the north of our hemisphere. How do you determine the front door versus the back door? The front door is where you want to greet people and treat them humanely and show them civilization. The front door is where when you see someone that needs some help, you offer to them and you give them hospitalization. You don't send the military to people that are seeking asylum. Who is an illegal alien? I remember in the 80s when they talked about a third world country on the same planet. Where's the third world? Where's the back door to America? Is it where the Mayans had their civilization, where we all came from? When the first time I went to Los Angeles, I thought every black person in LA could speak Spanish. I would see Pico Boulevard before I knew that was a black man, Sheriff Pico. And I'd hear brothers talk about Sepulveda and Cahuenga and La Cienega. I didn't know those were just street names all in Spanish. We are a part of Mexico. God did not make a Hispanic. Hispanics are determined by the U.S. Bureau of Census south of the American border. In Mexico, they're Mexicans. When they cross the border coming north, they're called Hispanic. It's a political tool. It's an artificial term. Ain't no Hispanics in Spain. They're Spaniards. I can. The front door versus the back door. It's a level of contempt and arrogance. We've seen this, and my father talks about it, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, all the time, in being attuned to the language. The rich are said that they misappropriate funds, that they have engaged in mortgage fraud, and the poor steal. You say the rich misremember, and you say that the poor absolutely lied and obstructed justice. They say that the rich were juvenile delinquents and had some indiscretion in their youth. They were children at the time. And they say that these young African Americans need 3 strikes. They are irredeemable. Come on, y'all, stop playing with it. You see it when my child was on the highway one day with me, and he says, "Daddy, ooh, that's a bad word." And I'm driving, and I look around. "What are you talking about?" He says, "That word says hate." I said, "Oh, that is a bad word." But it was, everybody hates Chris. And I couldn't help but think everybody loves Raymond. I couldn't help but think about Dennis the Menace, a child that has a problem, versus being a menace to society where all the children are the problem. Where you see the cartoon characters now where they're blonde and beautiful and white, and when they've done something evil, now they're going to be made to be black and a female with curly hair. You better watch what your children are watching, because that self-hate that can seep into us. I'm telling you, some of those Border Patrol agents that speak Spanish, that are Mexican of Spanish ancestry, have the same hate for their own people. I love Rainbow Push, and I love you more for even coming out and caring. There are too few of us that do too much, and there are too many that want to willfully be blind, to look the other way. And I'm going to leave this with you in conclusion: to do justice and to love kindness. Now, when I say kindness, I'm not talking about what some people are thinking. I'm not talking about offering milk and cookies and hugs to a little bitty baby. I'm not talking about being sweet and just lovey-dovey-wovey. I'm talking about a daring sort of kindness. I'm talking about a vulnerable kindness. I'm talking about a compassionate, caring, doing something kindness. I'm talking about a forgiving kindness. I'm talking about a grace and mercy and a love-filled kindness. I'm talking about in spite of kindness. I'm talking about being bigger than yourself, kindness. And when I say do justice, you've got to want to see. Dad, some people don't see a poor person all day long. They walk past somebody begging and hungry in front of their office every day. At every exit they get off on the highway, it's the same person, trust me. You may act like you don't see them, but they see you. And they know you. I remember giving something to we were at fellowship one day, Dad, and I told Reverend Evans, every time I come around here, this one person, he like locks into me and asks me for some money. And I didn't have any money to give. I was embarrassed. And I don't know what to do, but I don't know why he always asked me for some money. I'm thinking Reverend Clay Evans was going to side with me and tell me something I wanted to hear. And he says, Jonathan, it's good that you have a look on your face that you would help somebody. Because you don't have to be asked for nothing. Because they know people that have something that won't give them anything. And he says, and secondly, it's a blessing to have something to give when you do. Do your best. That was his whole message. I left their heart broken, but now I feel a little better. Do justice. Love kindness.